when Seth missed an episode a couple of shows ago, we did this whole tortured thing about how he refused to play if the Chiefs starters weren't playing, and how he demanded that we be backups and carry the load for him. And it was really, I'll admit now, just a terrible, terrible cover for the fact that Seth was sick. And in retrospect, I give Seth a really hard time in opportunities like that, because frankly, he deserves them. So anyway, Nate's sick. It's just me and Seth today.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
I think when Nate's gone, it's drama-free. When Seth's gone, we have to begin to ask questions about the locker room, really, about is Tucker doing enough to keep these guys in line? I hadn't seen, this was not where we thought we were going to start today, Seth. Did you see the clip of Jalen Waddle asking Tyreek Hill if he was done, and then Tyreek Hill being done?
I saw that, and that's rough. And you can be an emotional person, and you can be all sorts of other things, but that's a bad look. And I'm not like whatever. People are human. They make mistakes. And I've seen Tyreek Hill play hurt a bunch of times. I've seen him play really hard in a number of different games. Yeah, but have you seen Tyreek
Hill make a mistake?
Not one that anyone could prove by clear and convincing evidence. And so it was a genuinely bad look. And I don't.
He said this. I heard him say this season was really special because his daughter was born. I think it's impressive that he makes sure that every season is special for a different way.
Everyone has a choice in how they choose to live their lives. And some people just do whatever pops in their head at any given moment. And sometimes that means, yeah, I'm done playing today. And it's like, okay, well, I guess that's it. And I will tell you one thing, because of course people are already talking about, well, where's Tyreek Hill going to be next year? It's not going to be with the Chiefs.
Miami.
Yeah, it's going to be Miami. Yeah, because he's going to get a little less emotional. He's going to calm down, and he's going to remember he lives in Miami. He's fabulously wealthy. It's going to be fine. But it is interesting though to see someone who is a legitimate NFL superstar miss all the winning. Like, that's kind of nice, because that's really what I think it is. It's just he misses all the winning. It's got to be tough. And Nick Wright made the good point that when Tyreek Hill left the Chiefs, they were in, for them, a drought. They hadn't even gone to the Super Bowl the year before. They had lost in the AFC Championship. It's like, whoa.
That's a great point. That's the low mark of the last 6 years.
Isn't it? And it's just such an interesting thing, because when you think about where the Chiefs were and how they were perceived, I mean, I know how we felt when they traded him, and we were like, whoa, new era. Most people didn't expect them to come back and have the best offense in the league in 2022 and then win the Super Bowl again somehow in 2023. Now they're competing. It was a very different thing. And even that level, because it's been a whole different level since he left. He left, and they were on this very, very, very high level. Now they are on like, oh, hey, we're knocking on the door of history level. And they
were on the trajectory when he was here. They have achieved that trajectory after he left.
Yeah, and that is absolutely, it's a bizarre thing. I see someone in the comments, this is a decent question. Dion Moten asks, oh man, did I just get got? No, I think that's just your name.
I don't think so.
No disrespect.
Motor Boaton says,
how does Tyreek get a pass for not going into a game, and we vilified the linebacker from San Francisco?
Thank you. Thank you. Devondre Campbell refuses to go into a game and gets suspended for the rest of the year, and everybody crushes him. Anthony Richardson goes out for a play, and the entire discourse around him changes. I sorry for cutting you off mid-reading that question, but I had to Google Devondre Campbell because I could not remember his name, which is part of it. Tyreek Hill, I think, has the benefit of two things that those guys don't have. The one you've already mentioned. Tyreek Hill has a pretty long list of like injuries he's played through, stuff he's toughed out, achievements that he's had as a professional, and then two, he's a star, baby. Like, Mike McDaniel knows that if he's going to keep his job next year, it's going to be on an offense, due to an offense that has Tyreek Hill at the middle of it. The rules are different as you climb that hierarchy. It's uncomfortable, but it's incredibly obviously true.
Which means that you get a little bit different treatment from the team, the coach, the players surrounding you. They're not going to be as vocal. Like in San Francisco, the players were vocal. And I get why. For what it's worth, had Jalen Waddle been vocal after the game, I would have gotten it. I'd have been like, dude, we're out here. Like, yes, I get you're upset we're losing, but this is also a game that you are collecting like a $3 million game check for.
And they were still technically alive at that point. I mean, they were alive in the playoff race at that point in that game.
Which is holy crap on a cracker. But I think there's that. And then there's also the reality of, I remember a few weeks ago we talked about the way that our expectations inform how we view players. Mm-hmm. I personally think that Tyreek Hill has had enough go on with his career at this point and off-field stuff, this, that, and the other thing, and all the stuff that he said on his, podcast called "It Really Didn't Need to Be Said" or whatever.
Boy, I forgot about it needed to be said.
Yeah.
What a time.
And I think people have seen enough from him that it's just a collective shrug. It's kind of like how, where we're at right now, where we're at with, this is embarrassing because I don't really follow the NBA. The Golden State Warriors guy, the guy that can punch out a team. Draymond Green.
Yeah.
He does things that if anyone else did them, people would be like, they're going to kick him out of the league, right? And everyone's like, that's just Draymond being Draymond. Sometimes you just commit assault against a teammate because he said something back to you. Oh, well. And it's a similar thing, and that's the way it is in life. It's a tiered system. Your previous behavior and your importance to your company genuinely dictate what you are allowed to get away with, and that's just how it works.
Full circle. That's why I didn't give Nate a hard time for being sick for today's show, but I did give Seth a hard time for skipping his show when he was sick.
Yes.
Sometimes it's about what you bring to the table.
Absolutely. What I bring to the table is a pretty questionable haircut and occasionally saying things that get memed into oblivion. That could be replaced.
You can see the hierarchy. Don't give Seth a hard time. Or don't give Nate a hard time. Do give Seth a hard time. Josh doesn't miss shows. Sometimes you got to know that the first time, Tucker got one rep behind me, and it was like that video of that's a great play by the backup out there. It's like, he did okay. That's a nice play for a backup. Like, no, he should start. I don't know about all that. I wouldn't go that far.
Coach, I think I'm feeling better. I think I could go back in.
I think I could probably connect from here. So with that absolutely unplanned intro, what will be borderline off-season vibes, even though the playoffs are here, because that's kind of the vibes of everything right now. I've got kind of three main things I want us to touch on here. The main one being Seth has an entire 3-game combined 30,000-foot view of Patrick Mahomes' final 3 games of the regular season, and then 4,000 words at the end just about Carson Wentz and Chris Oladokun in Week 18 against the Broncos. Seth, really gripping stuff. Which of Carson Wentz's throws were your favorite?
The 3 that were complete.
I was trying to think of how many completions there were. Without looking, how many completions did Carson Wentz have? I'm not looking yet. I have the game log up, but I haven't opened.
11?
I was gonna say 6. I think you're probably closer. 10. He was 10 for 17. High completion percentage, not a lot of yards.
I have had people ask me about that, like if I was going to do a film review, and I said there's an easy sentence for it. He looked uncomfortable in literally the worst circumstances a quarterback could be placed in.
Yeah, didn't, Mr. Wentz.
Yeah. He didn't necessarily do anything to help rise above the circumstances, but there's no way of grading him based on that. His arm looks live still. He had a couple throws where you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I could see it. And you could tell he got a little frustrated in a few plays where, his number one target is Nico Remigio, who got some separation but also didn't sit down in the right spot a couple times. That's just tough. But yes, the Patrick Mahomes stuff is much more important. I did not do the weekly film review for Week 18. I already watched all those snaps charting DJ Humphries. Don't make me do it again. Was gross.
You watched a lot of snaps. When did Chris Oladokun run for 5 yards? I'm seeing that in the bottom. I'm seeing 1 for 5, and I'm thinking, when When did that? I did stick with that game. I just can't. I'll tell you what, folks. Not one that I went back to NFL Plus for. No. Not checking out the all 22 of that. But you've looked at the all 22 of those Mahomes games.
Yes.
There are a few interesting things that I think are all going to be intertwined together here. I'm just going to kind of let you go until you get bored of a certain topic, and then I'll try to pick a question to throw back at you. But I am interested in what you think the most important takeaways are. I am, of course, continually interested in that left tackle conversation and how you saw that be impacted by the way the Chiefs were playing, the differences between that Browns game and the two that followed. Mm-hmm. Again, you can read along and watch the clips in the Chief of the North newsletter, mnchiefsfan.substack.com, or you can go to bit.ly/Seth really hates money, all lowercase, and you can subscribe for no money a decade, essentially. What is it, $12 a year?
It is $12 a year.
I didn't say
that price locks in if you use it.
Yeah, it stays there forever. It's not like a thing that escalates in year 2. It's just $12 a year for as long as you stay subscribed.
Maybe it'll go away next year. Who knows? Who knows what I might do?
I've been saying this for so many years.
Yeah.
So what is the most important part for those of us who maybe can't afford the 2-1? I'll do the math of how many cents a day that costs. For those of us who can't shell out the shillings, what's the most important thing that you saw from Mahomes in that 3-game stretch?
If I were to name the most important thing just from Mahomes during that 3-day stretch, it would be that there's a possibility that he's got his deep ball mojo back. That was, if you were talking about just him without, kind of looking at the offense from 5,000 feet in the air, he had multiple good 20-plus yard throws, which it's not that he's been horrible at them this year, but it's been really inconsistent. And some of the downfield stuff, it's just been kind of back and forth. We've talked about that a lot with Xavier Worthy. Now, the unfortunate thing for him is, and this is the thing where sometimes the quarterback, sometimes the receiver, 2 of his best throws ended up as incomplete because one, Justin Watson just kind of started to – it was against the Texans. So Justin Watson, the Texans are blitzing, so the safety has to come down and cover Watson man-to-man. The problem is – that when you have to drive down as the safety, that means your momentum's bringing you forward, which means if he's going upfield, you're moving the wrong direction. And so Watson's running right up the seam, and Mahomes lets the ball go. Watson turns to his left to look for it, and then just kind of drifts a little. We've all been there, right? You're driving somewhere, and you look, and you're like, oh, that's weird. You kind of like, whoa, yeah. Stop looking at the things. There's this, that really gigantic bridge in Tampa, the one that connects Tampa to
Yes, I had to drive over that one time, and it was bizarre. I guess twice.
It's crazy how high it goes. So, large ships can sail underneath it. Not boats. That bridge is for ships. Yes, it's cool.
It really is kind of bonkers. It's kind of an optical illusion that you're driving on.
Yeah, it's weird, and everyone drives on it really fast, even though it's kind of scary. You get really high in the air. So Jazz has a running rule. We've driven over that multiple times because we usually go, to Sarasota or Anna Maria, so you go from Tampa Bay. Anyway, Jazz's rule is I'm not allowed to look at the view. It's a great view, but I'm not allowed to look because and she knows that I'm not gonna, oh, look at this. And it's a highway. But she just, because we've all drifted from time to time. So that's her rule is, if it's oh, look at the pretty lights. Why are you looking at the lights? I'm like, okay, honey, let's relax here a little bit. So I tell her to calm down because that always helps. But anyway, that's what Justin Watson does. He looks and his body follows his head. And had he been in a car, he would have died. But he wasn't. He was on a football field.
Some people like you because of the film work you do. I think your fastball is the 90-second diversion that comes back around to. So anyway, that's what Justin Watson does. Because that right there, that's special. That's generational.
You know what? Well, thank you. That's sermon 101. That's preaching 101 right there. Hey, we've got this thing that I could just say. Or we could go on a 90-second journey together. Let's do that. The
thing about it that I think really that keeps it in a conversational mode as opposed to a sermon mode is that you seem just as surprised by it as anybody. So whenever that idea comes through your head, it's just like, oh, I'm kind of thinking it out as I'm talking. That is what Justin Watson kind of does. And
It
it's
is.
a great analogy.
It's a great analogy, and let me tell you, you've clearly never heard me preach because I'm just like, what were we talking about again? I need these notes. So Justin Watson veers left out of the seam, and then he realizes what he's doing, tries to veer back right. The ball still goes right between his hands, but at that point, it's over. And then the other one was the almost terrific Worthy catch on the right side of the end zone. That was literally a perfect throw. Can't throw it any better than that. But just because it's a perfect throw doesn't mean that it doesn't need a great catch. And Worthy almost hauled that in. It was basically as good as coverage as you can have in that situation. Perfect ball down the field, almost hauled it in. He had another deep ball to Justin Watson. He had one against the Browns with Kelsey, I believe, where 31-year-old Kelsey gets that. Yeah. The ball goes over his head, and 31-year-old Kelsey gets that. 35-year-old Kelsey jumped a little early, and the spirit was willing, but the flesh was weak, and that's how it goes. So that's the biggest thing that I've seen is over the course of those 3 games, they were mostly just getting the ball out fast. His deep ball did not look good against the Browns. He was all over the place. His accuracy was all over the place. We talked about that weeks ago. Against Houston and Pittsburgh, his footwork looked really cleaned up on those deep throws, and the accuracy was much better. And so that was an interesting thing in terms of him because they're trying to do this short passing attack stuff. You saw kind of a return of a lot of the RPO type looks. Hollywood Brown runs those really well, by the way. Him getting his deep ball mojo back basically prevents teams from overcompensating for those quick throws because you can't let one of them go. Because, we saw it like against the Steelers. One 45, 50-yard gain to Justin Watson, it's a killer. And so that to me is the biggest thing to take away from Mahomes' film over the last couple weeks is it looked like he got his deep ball mojo back. And before anyone says, well, see, clearly it's because Joe Tooney was in there. No, it stunk against Cleveland. So he clearly went – I've seen Mahomes do this before. You and I talked about this several times. He is one of the only quarterbacks I've seen who can correct things midseason with his footwork or with his pocket presence. It's freakish. I don't know how he does it. So that's the biggest takeaway for him personally.
You got right to the question that I was going to oop back to you, which is how much of that is Mahomes, how much of that is the offensive line, how much of that is having Hollywood back? Because theoretically, the in-season fix from Mahomes should be consistent. Theoretically, you're either going to get DJ Humphries or Joe Tooney at left tackle. So, again, I think the relationship of all that remains interesting. And Hollywood's back, and you've gotten this sort of late-season continued growth from Worthy. So I think all of that working in concert is probably at least the majority of the answer. But what improved by the most, I suppose, in the specifics of the deep ball? Because we were talking about the deep ball non-stop in training camp, in the preseason. I think we were even talking about it almost through when Rashee Rice got hurt, even though Hollywood was already out at that point. We didn't know how long he'd be out. That was basically absent to this point in the season. Which of those factors are you isolating as the most to credit?
His feet, because he's been under pressure for a couple of them. And so it's not just that he's got this clean pocket. It's just you can see a concerted effort from him to get his feet set. Mahomes can get away with bad feet. Better than almost anyone in the league, but it's still going to lower his accuracy, and he's never been an elite deep ball passer. People can point to 2018. I would just say that offense was just tearing teams apart. They just weren't ready for it, and so he can throw a good deep ball, even a great one, with his feet set. But that's one area where he can't quite compensate as well. Intermediate, shallow, he can do whatever he wants. He could throw standing on his head, whatever. But that's one area where that deep ball, his feet need to be cleaner for any kind of consistency, and that was the biggest change I saw.
Is there anything else offensively that we haven't absolutely beaten with a stick in terms of like what there is to dissect? Because I think maybe some of this can become forward-looking with maybe specifically Hollywood and Hopkins, guys who it feels like we have seen the tip of the iceberg for potentially, who have no reason to hide anything as these next few weeks unfold. But
January.
It's actually January. The games actually mattered, not week 18, which was also in January. But that wasn't real January. January starts when the playoffs start. So that I am like interested in looking forward to what that may look like. I guess back to the left tackle thing, noting not good against Cleveland, also Myles Garrett, but good pass rushers against Houston and Pittsburgh as well.
Yeah,
I know you just did you did the Tuni Caliendo film review back at the beginning of that stretch. You just did the Humphreys one. Did anything else O-line based clarify for you on the Mahomes review?
Sure. I will say, reviewing the Pittsburgh snaps, Cam Hayward, Caliendo was borderline unplayable against him, which, to be fair, Hayward is an awesome player. He's so good. He's like 90% of Chris Jones out there, which at 35 is unbelievable. He's so good. But Caliendo, if the game plan had not been a lot of quick throws, a lot of moving pockets, a lot of the stuff that we talked about on Tuesday, Caliendo would be getting talked about right now as a potential game wrecker in a bad way. And I feel bad because he's coming in as a backup, and he's largely been okay enough to not completely tank things, but part of that is because they've changed the offense. So one thing I would say, I've got two things, one of which I'm really interested in. The other one we've kind of beaten to death, like you said. The quick throws we've talked about a ton. It was against Cleveland. If you actually look in the first half against Cleveland, they were trying to do kind of some of their normal stuff. Mahomes got beat to crap. Myles Garrett really started to take over in the third quarter too. But he started to get happy feet, so then the ball started coming out way faster, and that continued against Houston, and that continued against Pittsburgh. The ball's coming out immediately. You're doing a bunch of things to kind of help your offensive line, particularly on the left side. That makes sense. So that's something we've talked about a ton. The return of RPOs, the rolling pockets, that stuff is all really going to be important in the postseason as well. One thing that it's kind of interesting to me that I feel like is something we haven't talked about a ton. I feel like the offense shifted a little bit in the last two games with Mahomes, of course, to be a little more receiver-oriented than offensive line-oriented. And what I mean by that is they started spreading the field out even more than they normally do. You saw more like kind of 4 wide type sets, even if, one of the guys was Travis Kelce, or even if Kelce and Gray were on the field. You saw more empty, where they used to do this all the time. Running back in the backfield, motion him out to kind of see if you can get some kind of tell from the defense and let them run out of empty. And there's been some good analysis that's been offered on this, even in game. One way to slow down a pass rush, and this seems counterintuitive. People think, oh, you got to bring in a tight end. You got to bring in a running back. One way to really slow down a pass rush in terms of they need to get home more quickly and preventing blitzes and really messing with disguises is 5 guys that are viable receivers, if they're good receivers. If you can have 5 guys out there, any one of which can be a bit of a threat to beat man coverage and create a mismatch, you can hunt mismatches all over the field, because no team in the NFL has 5 guys who are good in coverage. The Chiefs did last year. That's part of what made them so psychotic to play against, is they could go 5 or 6 guys deep. Oh yeah, that guy can play man. We're fine. No team can really do that comfortably in terms of being good enough to stay with a Brown, a Worthy, and a Hopkins. And they're weird types of matchups, right? You need to be a very different type of corner to cover DeAndre Hopkins than to cover Hollywood Brown. And so that's one thing they've done a little more of. One of my favorites, and I'm looking at it right now, where it was a 3rd and short. It was 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4 against Houston. And Mahomes had everyone spread out, and then he had the Pirine motion out of the backfield at the snap, and then just immediately looked, okay, let's see how they rotate. And Hopkins just went right to an open zone. Boom. Easy 5 yards, 6 yards, first down. When you have guys that you trust versus man or zone, which they do, and you've got some guys that can separate a little bit versus man, one of the things that you can do is start just spreading it out and saying, yeah, our offensive line needs to hold up, but only for about 2.5 seconds, because we'll get the ball out. Now that's it's something that I'm curious if they start poking at that, because it's one way to protect the offensive line in a weird way, depending on the team that you're playing.
It's also just for at least the third time this season, such a personnel-based evolution for the offense. Because, and maybe it's a little bit of a reversion to what it would have looked like at the beginning of the year if those receivers had stayed healthy. Obviously, Rice instead of Hopkins being the most obvious trade-off there. But they were going to be let's say a short to intermediate wide receiver-based offense until Rashee Rice got hurt, and then obviously Hollywood getting hurt. Thinking about him in the intermediate in particular. You lose both of those guys, and so you're going to become like this ground and pound, but actually Isaiah Pacheco just broke his ankle, so here's Kareem Hunt again. And now you're going to run the ball and take these, not that time of possession matters in a vacuum, just to be clear, but you take these long, clock-destroying drives of these 4-yard run, short pass conversions that ultimately still, rely on Mahomes in the passing game to keep the ball moving. But you go through all of that, you start getting healthy again, and suddenly you get all your receivers back at the very end of the regular season, and you start seeing stuff like this again, that, to your point about who it is that you're covering, how you're stressing these defenses, the diversity of the types of weapons that you have. You just can't do all of this with Week 8 Xavier Worthy, Justin Watson, and Juju Smith-Schuster. It just, the pieces just don't end up being there. And now, like even getting the greed of looking ahead a little bit to next season and thinking about like the wide receiver questions the Chiefs are going to have throughout this offseason and everything, you start to get back to that point of, I'm not sure we got enough footballs to feed all these top tier weapons that might be a part of this team next season. And that is, I want to put a spotlight on that because that feels a million miles away from where this team was. And again, like throwing a dart week 8.
Yep. It is a completely different feeling. The Hopkins trade had to happen. And Worthy's development has been huge, and Brown coming back. All three of those they're better than they were, right? Significantly better. And so it really does provide an opportunity to actually create mismatches rather than, well, I'll say it this way. It allows you to hunt mismatches rather than being forced to create them. Andy Reid has had to create mismatches at times in terms of putting Worthy in a position that he can succeed. Or putting Justin Watson in a position. I mean, remember, we are 2 months removed from Justin Watson leading the team in snaps at wide receiver and targets for one game, if I recall.
I think that's right.
And so they've just all come so far. They've figured out how to weaponize Worthy. They've started to trust him on some of these boundary routes where he's getting open. It is a really cool thing, and you can hunt mismatches now. Like the way we've seen teams treat Najee Johnson, there's a potential to do that depending on what a team is doing. And I feel bad Najee Johnson's catching a stray there, but hopefully he comes back. He's a little healthier next season. I think that ACL is taking a little while to come back, get his full explosion. So that's a really good point, and it's just exciting. There's a distinct possibility that the Chiefs in the playoffs are much better on offense than they've been all season. And I've been back and forth on this. People have asked, like, what would be the funniest result? Because you know me, I enjoy funny things. Like, I enjoy the chaos on Twitter when things go a certain way. The funniest result would be the Chiefs somehow averaging 30 to 35 a game throughout the playoffs and winning the Super Bowl that way. Like, you know what I mean? Like, can you imagine?
Entirely plausible. That's the thing about it that's kind of that is a little bit bonkers at this point. And it's not fan fiction of what we hope happens. And well, imagine if this team got Hollywood back and if they had traded for DeAndre Hopkins. They have them. They're here. Yeah. They've been in the offense for a long time now, both of them in different ways. Hopkins gotten a lot more live reps, but Hollywood was here throughout the offseason activities. I think there's a really good chance that they do, after not scoring 30 in any game in the regular season. They could have in the one where Hunt slid at the end. But after not breaking 30, in regulation, I guess. They hit 30 against Tampa, right?
Yeah.
They also hit 30 against Carolina.
There's one of the two.
What's the stat? It's both of them.
They went to overtime.
They went to overtime against the Bucs and hit 30, and then they hit 30 against Carolina. What was that? It is more than 30. Okay, fine. Without going over 30 at any point in the regular season, I think there's like a non-zero chance they don't stay under 30 in the postseason. I'm not like predicting that. I wouldn't bet on that happening, but it seems entirely plausible that in games against the Texans and Steelers in particular, we saw the offense hit its stride and then them like let off the throttle a little bit because they know that they relearned what their top speed is again. And that's exciting.
Yes. It's something we haven't seen a ton of this season in terms of them having a top gear that they could throttle back from. And it'll be interesting because, I mean, they're either going to play, I would assume, if they win in the divisional round, my assumption is they'll play either the Bills or the Ravens.
Yep.
Both of those defenses have been vulnerable all year. And on a side note, and I know we want to talk about the playoffs in general, you can kind of miss me with the whole, like, oh, the Ravens are an elite defense again. Just look at who they've played. They have not played. They played the Eagles when the Eagles were kind of in the midst of their offensive doldrums. They played the Steelers twice after the Steelers were kind of broken. They played the Giants. They have not
killed
played
the Texans on Christmas after the Texans slide had already started.
Yeah, and the Texans, I mean, some of C.J. Stroud's weaknesses that he showed in the playoffs last year, he hasn't been able to fix, and his offensive coordinator hasn't done him any favors. So, I mean, maybe they're off. Maybe really all they needed to do was get Kyle Hamilton in a more traditional safety role. Suddenly they go from a terrible secondary to an elite one. I'm slightly skeptical, but it'll be at least interesting to see what that looks like in the first round of the playoffs. And that's such an area where the Chiefs have the first round bye is such an advantage. I mean, it's an automatic win.
Man.
It's win, rest, and tape. They get to, right now, the Chiefs get to scout very specifically, and every team, of course, has a few guys looking at every team in the playoffs. They've got deep pockets. They've got deep departments, unless you're the Bengals, because Mike Brown would never pay for that. But they have the ability. I can't help myself. I don't know what my problem is. So
we all have our beefs.
So they have the they have the ability, though, to focus exclusively on 2 or 3 teams, while those teams can't think about them at all. Yep. Like if you're the Broncos right now, you can't think about the Chiefs at all. If you're the Chargers, you can't think about the Chiefs because you got to win. It's such a huge advantage game planning wise or whatever. And so it'll be interesting to see with the Ravens how their defense looks. I mean, they'll be playing the Steelers again. This time Pickens is back, which matters, I think. But it'll be cool. It'll be cool to see what that looks like. I think there is a path where the Chiefs could theoretically score 30 plus in every game, depending on how the playoffs play out. You know, if you end up playing the Lions in the Super Bowl, that secondary is not healthy. So it's all really interesting. A lot of hypotheticals. I'm just excited to see how it plays out. I can't believe we're in the playoffs, by the way. Like, this season went by quick for one that has been no fun during games.
I want to do a little bit of a big picture vibe check, but of those AFC teams, who's the one right now that you're like maybe the least excited for the Chiefs to potentially see? Let's take a break.
Shop Chiefs tickets and more with no fees. Plus, save big with code KCSN at ticketsforless.com, the official ticket provider of KC Sports Network.
We'll do a full little playoff look ahead here in a few minutes, but I wanted to run something by you in terms of a slightly forward-looking vibe check, and then a little bit of Chiefs news that we've gotten in this last few days, and then we'll look at the playoff teams for real. Here's the thing that I was thinking about earlier that really does align with where your head was just at. It's the fact that we are here with just you and me doing a show where I have not spoken to Nate today. I don't want to say this on Nate's behalf, but I think if the Chiefs had a playoff game on Saturday or Sunday, we might get like a snotty, coughing Nate on the show, like toggling his mute button, blowing his nose off camera, and coming back to tell us whatever he learned at pressers, right? Instead, it feels like a bye week. Like it genuinely, it feels like a mid-season week off of like, yeah, there's still NFL action happening, but everything's been pretty smooth. So that's the positive slant of this, just that everyone ought to enjoy. I'm like I am more excited about this weekend of football than I feel like I get very often, because there is no stress, there's no Chiefs stuff, there's very, very little work to be done from our perspectives, and it's going to be great football for 3 days, I guess, with the college games, like 5 days. This is going to be an awesome time to watch games that matter but don't really impact you. Obviously, the AFC games will determine who the Chiefs are playing, but we got a pretty good guess, and we'll just see it all play out. That's all fine. Here's the other thing that I think is kind of interesting. After Christmas, I think the narrative around the Chiefs started to shift nationally. And you started to get a little bit, specifically from people who like typically know ball, who have responsible conversations on the television, even if they haven't won 3 Pulitzers. And I think some of those people started to get to the place of, hey, the Chiefs have had these issues all year long. Those might not be issues anymore. And it's not just that they've won the last 2 championships. It's that they, quote, like, know how to win, but also they are getting healthier at these positions that have been hampering them this entire season. Some of the choices they're making are beginning to solve some of the issues that they've had throughout all of the season. The Chiefs seem to be playing their best football at the right time. Mm-hmm. That was the week after Christmas. Every single conversation that I have seen or heard nationally about the Chiefs for the last 2 weeks has been about too much rest, or about the Bengals, or about the rest of the NFL. And I think we're going to get to a place starting Monday, probably. Let's say the Chargers go out and they beat the Texans by 20 points. The Texans look totally busted and the Chargers just dominate them. On Monday, we will have people talking about how the Chargers are going to get a weaker Chiefs team. Like, the Chargers are going to be it's their third swing, but this is a good matchup against an artificially inflated Chiefs team that's riding on their reputation. And you remember, viewer, you remember watching the Chiefs midseason? That wasn't an elite football team, and most of the time it wasn't. It was a very good football team that kept winning games. But I think it's going to be pretty interesting. Not that anyone should care necessarily, but I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see how those narratives settle as the Chiefs games do eventually come around. And yes, I'm boldly predicting games, plural, I believe. But I find it interesting just as a little quirk of the schedule, where after a week or two of most of the Chiefs' discourse being about them figuring it out and them hitting their stride and all of that, we've now had several weeks of Chiefs discourse that has been about teams that should have been in the playoffs, or the Chiefs resting their starters, or Carson Wentz. And I don't know, I'm interested to see how the next couple of weeks pan out.
That's a really good point. And the discourse around the Chiefs, I think it's just been interesting all season. Yeah. It really is hard to cover a dynasty, I think. Yep. When you are a show or a author or whatever that is trying to cover the entire league, eventually what you're going to focus on are the reasons why the big bad is going to lose and why someone else is going to win. Like, anytime you turn on a game, if you don't have a rooting interest, you know who I almost always root for when I turn on a random game, whether it's college, NFL, baseball, basketball, whatever, right? The team that's losing, usually.
I got to put a pin in this just to note that at some point, you, me, and Nate have to do a parody panel show where we preview and break down David v. Goliath, because I think we could crush that.
That would be really funny. That would be really elite content. I would enjoy that a great deal.
You're telling me that this young boy with a stone is gonna take down this 9-foot tall Goliath? Are you out of your mind?
For one thing, it's not one stone, it's 5, okay? And I don't know if you've ever seen one of these shepherd boys sling these stones. You never seen it? See, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know. You haven't been there. You haven't been in the trenches.
You know what I've seen? I've seen a Goliath.
The man can't even carry his own. He can't even carry his own shield. He needs someone else to carry it for him. Exactly. He's not really committed to the game. He's a front runner. Anyway, that would be really fun. That would be fun.
I'm right this
So, no, I like it. I like it a lot. So the discourse around the Chiefs, though, it really does center around why they might lose, why everyone else might win. I've heard for like the third year in a row, maybe not the third year in a row, but this is the best team Lamar Jackson's ever been on. Wasn't that last year?
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
Weren't they like historically great, the best offense and defense in the league or something? And then it was the best San Francisco team. Oh, this team's even better than the one that played the Chiefs and brought them to a head in 2019. It was all this stuff. And I get it. And it might be true. And anytime you've got one team against the field is much more likely to win it all.
Yep.
But that's why, I just keep replying with that whole with that line from that Taylor Swift song that I think I've seen this film before. When I see even analysts that I really respect saying, "Oh, I think this is a team that I trust to go into Arrowhead and win." Why? Like what? It's one thing to say I think they can do it. Obviously, any of these teams in a one-off, other than maybe Pittsburgh or Houston, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know, dude. That would be Mahomes would have to kind of melt down a little bit. It would have
to actively lose that game, which we've seen them do before. It's just
They are very capable of it. But it's a pretty decent playoff field overall in the AFC. Yeah. I think it's a tougher field than the NFC. Could they beat them in a one-off? Sure. Any given Sunday, etc. But to act like it's likely, it's like, oh, this is what I definitely think is going to happen. Why? Have you seen the NFL and CBS, and base stats aren't the end all be all, even over a full season sample size. Have you seen the CBS graphic that's going around Mahomes 18 game statistics in the playoffs?
Oh yeah, but I didn't retain it. I saw it.
It would be like an all-time statistical season.
Yes.
It's freakish how good he is in the playoffs, absent one half against New England in 2018, and that was the first half, and then one half against Cincinnati in 2021. Beyond that, he's just unbelievable.
Those are also such outrageous outliers that people still talk about both of them.
Yeah, it was just what happened, man? And even then, against Cincy, you still needed Tyreek Hill to drop that pass in overtime. You know what I mean? You still needed Kelsey to drop a pass he should have hauled it. So I do think the discourse will be interesting. I think you'll be right. I think, let's say the Chargers convincingly beat the Texans, which I think they can, and I think they will. I think they're a better coach team. I think they're a more talented team. Although sneaky, low-key thing with how much they love to run the ball, which is weird when you have a cyborg at quarterback, but whatever. And you go from Dobbins to Ezekiel Elliott. I saw that sign and I was like, awesome. Yes, give him the ball 20 times. Because I've seen him run this year. Hey, Elliott's had a great career. A lot of respect there. But if any time he gets the ball instead of Justin Herbert dropping back, yes, please. Yes. Love it. But I think that, let's say the Chargers beat them convincingly. I think you're going to hear a lot of conversation about how close they played the Chiefs, even when they were really injured, which is true.
Yeah. I think the Chargers are good. I think Justin Herbert is great. That'll be enough to fuel that fire. Yeah. And that's, people will that'll be the narrative because everyone wants David to win. And I get that. And the Chiefs are Goliath. And then I think the Ravens, we'll see what happens with the Steelers. They have not looked good recently. The Broncos and the Bills interest me, but whatever team emerges from them, it's going to be about how, they're going to beat the Chiefs. And then the week after, unless the Chiefs, let's say the Chargers win, Chiefs play the Chargers, everything else goes chalk, right? Even unless the Chiefs put an absolute beat down on the Chargers, I think the conversation leading into an AFC Championship game, whether it's the Ravens or the Bills, will be why they will beat them. Yes. And that's just part of it. We all promised ourselves, and national media promised themselves we wouldn't do this again after last year. Everyone after the Super Bowl was like, can we just agree that we are never going to do this again? We're just not going to doubt the Chiefs. And, that's the news cycle. So it's exciting, and I love that you pointed this out. Some good football here. I'm genuinely excited for these games. I understand the Broncos barely made it in by the skin of their teeth, but their defense against the Bills and some of the things Sean Payton schemes up, some of the deep ball stuff to Mims, that's intriguing at least. Might be an interesting game. The Steelers and Ravens, that's divisional. Those are always weird. That's interesting.
Those things are just, it's going to be an interesting weekend of football. And we just get to watch these teams beat the crap out of each other while the Chiefs are at home going like, man, this rest feels terrific.
And we're going to play a team we've already studied at some point this season. Maybe a team we've played twice. It's wild.
Yes.
This is going to sound sarcastic, but it's really genuinely earnest. Even if like Steelers, Ravens, and Broncos, Bills end up being bad games, like George Pickens might fight somebody, and watching the Broncos get blown out would be funny in its own right. Like, they're like, I don't know. The Texans, I didn't watch almost any of that game on Christmas because I was watching Andy Reid's Christmas Day post-game press conference and all of that. And so by the time I got back to the actual game, it was over.
It happened fast.
That could get sad, I guess. And that maybe that is when you see a lot of Ezekiel Elliott just like maybe literally eating clock. Just fistfuls of time. But like, Chargers, Texans, Steelers, Ravens of just a Saturday of AFC action in your veins is delightful. Broncos, Bills is going to feel like you're scouting if you're or just, rooting for both of them to lose, I guess, because of, the Broncos are the Broncos and the Bills are good and could very well be the AFC's representative in the Super Bowl. And then the NFC games are all like pretty fun. Packers Eagles is weird because I feel like they've kind of been going in different directions in the last act of the season or so, but I'm intrigued to see both of them stress test each other. Commanders Bucks is like two teams that I have my skepticisms about, but play exceedingly fun football against each other. And then Vikings Rams on Monday night I really like the full 3-game Saturday, 3-game Sunday thing. So I was a little bit annoyed at, although they may have never done 3-3, I guess. I like the idea of that. I don't love Monday night playoff game.
Me neither.
Vikings Rams is going to be a great one for that.
Right.
It's two NFC teams who I don't think will win the Super Bowl. It's wild card weekend. Sorry it happens. The Rams are coming off a week of rest that nobody cared about, while the Vikings are coming off a week of Sam Darnold maybe looking like Sam Darnold from the Jets again, just a little bit. What's the energy in Minnesota right now? How are purple wearers feeling? Is it bleak?
Well, to quote it again, they think they've seen this film before.
Yeah, I like that we agree on the best Taylor Swift song.
I like that too. That was, I remember how pleasantly surprised you were when you were like, oh, well, that's actually I think that it's a really pretty song, like a legitimately,
song.
Yeah, and it says a lot about relationships too in an interesting way. It's like, she didn't give a warning sign, but she did give so many signs, man.
Exactly. It's all about perspective when you think about it.
Yeah, and although in that case, I'm just going to be honest, having been doing what I do for a while and being a pastor for a while, dude, she usually gave you a lot of signs. Like these are the signs are there, buddy. Just open your eyes a little bit. Look around you.
For the sake of that song, I'm glad Bon Iver didn't see them because I want to hear heartbroken Bon Iver singing about the ending.
Yes. It's and I always like songs where you get like the simultaneous singing, like together,
duets. I think they call it sometimes.
Yes, duets. Well, yeah, if you're a musician, I think you call them duets. It's kind of like the Boondocks. You get a line, I'll get a pull. That whole thing. No, okay,
No.
I'm too old. Nope, we're not doing this.
I'm aware of Boondocks, but I don't want you to explain it to me.
Anyway, I always enjoy that, but it's with the vibes in Minnesota are not great. The one thing I would say, though, that's interesting to me when you watch Vikings-Lions, I thought that game was an excellent case study in how a game with all the appearances of a blowout was actually quite close, and there were a lot of opportunities. Thank you, Kyle Coffey, in the comments. 5-card poke on a Saturday night, church on Sunday morning. You get a line, I'll get a pull. Okay, I won't do that. Sorry, Josh. So it is it's a good lesson in how a game can just get away from you if you miss the opportunities you have in front of you. Because the Vikings at a certain point really should have been up like 21-6. Something like that. And that changes the entire dynamic of the game. And that's why football is such a goofy back and forth sport, because you miss a few opportunities and suddenly games can get out of hand real fast. So that's the thing about the Vikings. Like, okay, are they going to be able to recover from that? Are they going to be able to get Sam Darnold back on track? And is there a chance that none of it matters because Matt Stafford is enough of a wild card?
Yep.
When Matt Stafford gets hot, that guy, hot Matt Stafford is a top like 3 quarterback.
Yeah.
Like can do unbelievable things. That might be fun to watch too. Like against Flores sending 17 guys on a blitz. I'd watch that.
Fun to watch. Absolutely.
That's going to be so much fun.
Yes. I learned something from the chat here just now from Dr. Ozzy that I think is important. The NFL is no longer calling it Super Wild Card Weekend.
Oh.
We won. No, I think this is a good development.
Yes.
It's just Wild Card Weekend again. They were calling it Super Wild Card Weekend. It was like on all the branding. It was on the schedules of welcome to Super Wild Card Weekend, which nobody ever called it in real life. I didn't know why we were doing that anyway. Thank you, Dr. Ozzy, for breaking that news that we have gotten rid of one piece of unnecessary branding from the NFL's brand guide. That's really exciting.
And I wonder, I mean, I guess you can keep calling something like super, like it's new and different. Like Super Bowl makes sense because there's a lot of other bowl games.
One, too.
It's like, and it's, the biggest game of them all, one bowl to rule them all, etc. But like Super Wildcard Weekend kind of made sense the first time because like, look how pumped up this is.
Yeah.
But like continuing it, everyone's like, well, no, now it's just Wildcard Weekend. This is just what we do.
If the Chiefs three-peat next year, they're just going to call it the Bowl. Two loose threads. I like that. 2 loose threads from earlier in the show, and then I want to get to the last thing that I think it's the last thing we want to talk about today. But just 2 stories previously heard on Only Weird Games. First of all, you can subscribe to the Chief from the North newsletter, fittingly, of course, for about 3.3 cents per day. So I think even a 3-time Super Bowl champion with far fewer touchdown passes than Patrick Mahomes could afford that. So 3.3 repeating, not quite. It's a little under that, actually, so you're getting yourself a bargain. And Patrick Mahomes' playoff stats, I found that tweet. I just figured I'd give out those actual numbers because they are nonsense. Patrick Mahomes' playoff stats, 18 games, 15-3 in the playoffs.
15-3 in the playoffs is insane.
5,659 yards, 46 total touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and a 105.8 passer rating.
That is stupidly good. It's
the greatest season in football history if you were to do it across 18 regular season games.
It's just at the highest levels too. It's just
with the best opponents.
Yeah, best opponents, and it's not like he's faced lay down defenses throughout this.
No,
it's just been. And that's the thing, like, is that the version of Mahomes we're going to get? Like, last year, they had such a great defense, and they had the limitations in the receiver room. They were able to patch a competent offense around Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice, and Patrick Mahomes with the occasional deep ball to MVS. What are we going to see this year? Like, I think that's something that has me so excited about this postseason is that there's a certain amount of question this year that hasn't existed in the previous years. We saw, to close the season last year, a path forward with Rashee Rice the last couple games. But we knew the limitations of everyone else. And we knew the defense, by and large, was going to have to not quite carry them because Mahomes still had to do some things that were borderline perfect in certain moments, especially in the Super Bowl. But it was close. You knew what they were. Whereas this year, there's this question with the offense. I honestly, especially with this much time off, that's enough time, a 3-week thing, that's enough time for a legitimate install. You can have a 12th install in that amount of time. 21 days, that's like what? Half of training camp?
Yeah.
Who knows what they might be doing? And that's so exciting to me because, the year's been a bit of a grind during games. Now they kept winning. So it's like
made Mondays easier.
Yeah, Mondays were always a lot easier, but in game, like how often you're like, good Lord, this is terrible. I'm just so excited to see what it looks like. And plus we're here now We talked about it, and I'm sure we'll talk about it next week. Before the season started, we were like, man, this is history. They have a chance at doing something that no one's ever done in terms of, 3 Super Bowls in a row. Yes, I understand the Packers won 3 NFL championships in a row, including, I think one of them was technically a Super Bowl, but the year before that, they played like 12 teams. Dude, it was in the 60s. Come on. No one cares. No one cares. It's the same reason no one brings up Bill Russell in the GOAT conversations. It's always MJ or LeBron. It's like, oh, wow, good for you, Bill Russell. You won 20 in a row in the 60s.
I don't know if do you want the Bill Russell fight? Is that one you want?
You know what? I'm not sure I do actually, because he was a great winner. It's like, the only other player in the NBA at the time was Wilt Chamberlain. No one else even existed. Okay, I'm going to stop now before I get someone really mad at me. I'm not engaging in good faith, people. So it's
just assume that unless Seth says actively, I am engaging in good faith, it'll save you some time.
That actually is really, really.
I've been doing it for years.
Yeah, that's really good advice. No matter how serious the topic either. It's like, oh, Seth's just not going to engage with me. That's great. Because it can either become my best trait or my worst trait, depending on what we're talking about. It's like, will you just engage? Pass. I'd really rather not, sir. So 3 Super Bowls, though, that is, they're here. We had the regular season. Well, we'll see how it goes. They went 15-2. And now they've got the bye week. They've got everything laid out.
15-1.
That's a solid point.
I'm gonna do that, I think. I think in 2024, I'm gonna say the Kansas City Chiefs went 15-1.
That, you know what? That's completely fair. And they have an opportunity here to be historic 3 in a row, to where you can say, yeah, this is the greatest dynasty of all time, and Patriots fans will be so upset, and they'll say, yeah, but they never beat Brady. Yeah, and Brady never beat Eli. No one freaking cares. Wait, you know what? I'll tell you what. Point me to the time the Patriots won 3 Super Bowls in a row, and we'll compare and see what was better. Oh, you can't? I mean, that would be so much fun to do. It'd be so obnoxious and not in good faith and wonderfully fun. And Paul here in the chat makes another good point here. If the Chiefs win the Super Bowl again this year, Mahomes will have 4 rings in 7 years as a starting quarterback.
It's unfathomable, man. That's unbelievable.
Yes.
They've been in the playoffs every year, and the only 2 people that Patrick Mahomes has lost to is Tom Brady and Lou Anarumo. And neither of those people currently have jobs in the on-field. I don't know. Tom Brady actually has enough jobs to cover for both of them in and around football.
I think Tom Brady might be our executive producer of this podcast at this point. He does everything else.
Listen, I think I'd take that, actually. I think that'd be good for KCSN. I think that'd be okay for us.
That's fair.
Speaking of a guy that Tom Brady may want to hire, I was pretty surprised to see not 1, not 2, but 3 head coaching interviews for Steve Spagnuolo. New York Jets, Las Vegas Raiders, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Meanwhile, Matt Nagy interviewed with the Jets. Interest from the Saints, but I don't think that's officially happened yet.
Yep.
The Jets are interviewing everyone who's ever touched a football before, as they probably should, considering the state of their organization. Maybe they're just going through, and the first question is always like, will you work with Aaron Rodgers? And they're like, no. Like, all right, on to the next one. And then they will hire Rex Ryan, and that will be, give him Hard Knocks. I'd say give him Hard Knocks.
Delightful.
Yeah, I'll tune in for that.
Aaron Rodgers 1,000,000% retires if they hire Rex Ryan.
Oh, that's such a good point.
I think midway through training camp, if not sooner.
Oh, that's even better. Give him Hard Knocks.
Yes.
I will subscribe to HBO for the Rex Ryan, Aaron Rodgers Hard Knocks. But I wouldn't hold my breath for the Jets job for either of them. I think the Raiders are also in quarterback hell, and they also fired Tom Telesco today after keeping him for a couple days, and then Tom Brady picked up a bat phone and called it in and whatever, allegedly. Allegedly is not even fair. That's fan fiction, but it seems plausible. And Mark Davis, frankly, could use the help. So I'm not even sure that's a bad thing that Tom Brady's getting like extra hands on. It's a conflict of interest in a way that matters, but I'm not sure that Tom Brady is going to be worse at marionetting an NFL team than Mark Davis is. But I will say, one, a little surprised pleasantly that Spags is getting head coaching interviews, but I'm surprised because do you know how many years younger he is than Andy Reid?
It's like 2?
Take the under. It's 1. Andy's 66 and Spags is 65.
Well, and he's on the brink of retirement.
Meanwhile, Pete Carroll I interviewed with the Bears, I think. The 65-year-old defensive coach is not a super hot build in the head coaching circuit right now.
Right.
But I think I will say every team with a vacancy ought to talk to Steve Spagnuolo. Everybody. Bring him in and let him charm you, or let him give you his ideas, or pick his brain, or whatever.
Yep.
You ought to have Spags' 3 favorite assistants lined up behind him. Like, hey, if you don't end up getting this job, or anybody that you've worked with that you think we ought to talk to, like, everyone in football should want to talk to Steve Spagnuolo all the time for any reason. I don't think this will happen, but I think the Jags make sense. That was the first one. I think the Raiders are scary because I don't think I would handle that as well as I'd like to believe. It would make me so sad.
That would bother me. Because really...
It would bother me. What do you mean bother you?
I like Spags enough that if the Chiefs just proceeded to continue to destroy the Raiders, it would bum me out for Spags.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, I wouldn't want to see Spags in a one-off game.
No, definitely.
Because his one-off game plans are unbelievable. Which, by the way, we're in the playoffs.
Yeah, one-off time, baby. It's Spags' territory.
But you are right, though, that teams should want to pick Spags' brain, if nothing else, to get some understanding of what the Chiefs are doing. Now, that doesn't mean you try to just, steal exactly, because someone's like, okay, step 1, have Andy Reid already, and then draft Patrick Mahomes. Okay.
Right.
While also having the greatest tight end to ever live, and also, one of the greatest interior pass rushers to ever live. Okay, that's step 1. That's a tough first step.
Yeah, it's tough.
But I'm surprised to see his name come up too, because he is older. He's a defensive coach.
Tucker says that he and Matt Verderame were looking it up on that football show here on KCSN, and the last head coach to get hired over 65 was Bruce Arians with the Bucks.
Right. I don't. I'd be surprised if he ended up getting a legitimate shot. I think I think it's always tough to be a head coach for the second time because people look, especially if you weren't successful the first time. Though there's a lot of Rams fans that'll talk about that, like you really didn't get a chance to succeed there roster-wise. But I think Spags, in terms of leadership, in terms of running the defense, in terms of getting buy-in, all that stuff, I think would be a tremendous head coach. It just who he hires as an offensive coordinator would matter a ton. Like that would be a really big deal.
So this is like a half-assed sell job because again, I'd rather him just not go anywhere. But with Jacksonville, the mistake that teams like the Bears keep making over and over and over again is head coach GM. Fire a head coach, let the GM try again. Draft a quarterback, let that coach try with that quarterback, and then the GM gets fired, and they fire the GM and the head coach. Now it's the same quarterback and a new head coach. Like, it's just that shuffling for me, my, simplest philosophy, if anyone wants to give me an NFL team to own, might be like, hey, I would like to start with a head coach, GM, and a quarterback that are all doing this together. Where the GM says we can get this guy, the head coach says I can win with that guy, and the quarterback just gets to sit with presumably an offensive-minded head coach to build that up. Like, that just seems healthier to me. They don't all have to be brand new faces, obviously, but let's make sure we're all on the same page here. With the Jags, they do know who their quarterback is. Like, Trevor Lawrence is going to be their guy there for a while. They just paid him pretty recently, and that's going to extend into the future. Now, Trent Baalke should not be in charge. I hope that Spags does not end up at any of the 3 places he's interviewed, in part because I think those are somewhat doomed organizations with at least how they function currently. Weirdly, the Raiders might be the closest to competence because they are just at 0, which I can't really say for the Jets, even though they've also fired everybody, and I can't say for the Jags because of their general manager. But if they said, hey, we have our quarterback, and we're going to bring in an offensive coordinator here who's not going to be a guy who's going to have one great season and go get a head coaching job in all likelihood. I don't know who that would be. And maybe it's Matt Nagy. Or maybe it's Doug Peterson. Nope, hold on. Maybe it's Eric Bieniemy. Nope, hold on. I don't know who Spags would want. And obviously, Spags would not be pulling from Andy's OC tree of failures. And don't think Doug Peterson would do the Vance Joseph thing, nor should he, nor would the Jags want that, obviously. But I could see them building that argument of like, hey, we've got a stable, fun leader to kind of reset the vibes here. We've got some defensive talent we can put into his hands, where he is a great game planner. He maximizes the defensive players that he has. And not only did his star safety make shirts with his face all over it and sell them during last year's playoff run, he's also spent these years with Andy Reid in this like often imitated culture attempt that teams try to build. I think it makes sense. I don't think he's going to get it. And also I saw a few Chiefs fans kind of asking about the Raiders job in particular. I'll just say with the utmost confidence, if Steve Spagnuolo is offered the Las Vegas Raiders job, and if it's the only job he is offered, he will take it. He should take it. You shouldn't be mad that he takes it.
Yep.
This is his last chance to get one more head coaching shot that may or may not ever be offered to him. Yep. But wherever it comes, there's only 32 of them, and really there's, 6 of them available right now, and a lot of young, offensive-minded coaches who I think are more likely to jump him in the line for that. So,
yeah. No, I agree with all of that. It would be an interesting thing to see. There's been so much stability on the defensive side of the ball overall. And one thing I suppose it shouldn't surprise me, because the defense was so great last year and they've overcome some stuff this year to be a good defense. Maybe that's where, schematically as a defensive coach, he's well-liked, he's well-regarded, he's well-respected. I would be surprised if he did it. It would be interesting to see what the Chiefs did if that happened, because my assumption is I think if that happens, you almost have to give Dave Merritt the defensive coordinator job, or I think Spags is dragging him to Vegas with him.
I think that's probably true. He and Colin has done it before. Merritt is going to do it. Those are kind of the guys in that spot, but I would love. I was talking to Jordan Foote about this because both of us listen to every Chiefs presser for ChiefsOnSI.com. And I told him, I really think, short of Mahomes retiring, I think that would hurt me the most as someone who listens to a lot of press conferences, because a Spags presser, this is totally arbitrary, totally selfish, but a Spags presser is an oasis in the world of very coach-speaky Chiefs press conferences that they always operate. And it would make me so sad on so many levels to lose Spags out of Kansas City. But if anyone was going to save us in the vibes department, it would be Dave Merritt. So the defensive vibes will be good, but he could leave and take a couple of those guys with him. I don't think he's going to, but I wanted to talk about it. And I really don't think Matt Nagy's getting a head coaching job this year. I think next year he could. I think if the offense looks better next year, and you have another year of the OC credit sharing and all of that, things look smoother with healthy wide receivers, I could see him getting another go. He probably deserves one. I just also am not deeply in love with him as an offensive coordinator at this point, but it's also very hard to judge because it's Andy Reid's offense. Maybe I'm just not in love with Andy Reid's adjustments.
Yep. And that's the problem. Anytime you're hiring an Andy Reid offensive coordinator, it's the interview should start with, what is it you'd say it is you actually did there?
Right.
Then can you sum up in 3 sentences or less what you did for the offense? Because if you can't do it in 3 sentences or less, it's bull.
And I'm guessing he would have a good answer for that we're never going to get to hear him say publicly, unfortunately, which would be very helpful. But obviously, Peterson won a Super Bowl, and Nagy wasn't a disaster in Chicago. He was Coach of the Year He's won Coach of the Year more recently than Andy Reid. I think it's interesting. We've gone well over an hour, even without Nate here, and so I feel like we have done our duty to send you into a weekend of not super, but excellent wild card action. You can read the newsletter. Seth's written there. You can read a bunch of stuff about Spags and Nagy. Mike Borgonzi, assistant general manager, has also been getting his name tossed around for GM interviews. We're covering all that and tracking all that over on ChiefsOnSI.com. So if you want to read over there and stay up to date with all that, Jordan and I are plugged into the Matrix. Every time there's a tweet that says, someone called Dave Tobe at 3:30 in the morning. Could it be the New York Jets? We're going to write about it. So if we get Dave Tobe's phone logs, we'll do that. Otherwise, we'll keep you posted on the hiring cycles and enjoy a wonderful weekend of football. With that being said, Seth, get us out of here.
Oh man, every time.
I did such a long lead up hoping that you would catch it. It was coming your way. A lot of air under this ball.
we've known each other for the better part of the decade, and you're still throwing those my way after watching them hit the ground time after time after time. I would just say this, Chiefs fans, enjoy the weekend, enjoy stress-free football, and let's all collectively agree that no matter what your belief system is, whether you are someone who is a person of prayer, whether you're someone who's a person of positive vibes, whoever those positive vibes or prayer goes to, we can all agree on one thing. We are all going to be praying for Jalen Watson's health. I don't care who you are. I don't care who you're praying to. I mean, I do, but we can talk about that another day. Jalen Watson. Jalen Watson.
I'm going to be praying for Justin Watson. Hey, this isn't the lab. There we go.